Finally. Let's hope. Mm-hmm. Well,
Oh
let's
wait,
hope that
now
the
I can't.
issues
Nobody's even hearing me anyway because I had my microphone muted. Jesus fuck. So anyway, yes, I do apologize to anyone who might still be out there watching. I do still have some. I have still continued to be having some issues with my connection. So I did contact my ISP early last week. Or early this week, rather, and so the issues have been a little better, but I did, of course, just disconnect. So we'll see if now I just re-enabled chat, but it's obviously not re-enabled. I don't know what's going on. Wait a minute. Let's see here. Okay, so we're not actually on the same. Let me go in and see where we're at.
okay.
I may have to look into a different address, and it says that we're not actually live at the moment because the video output is low. So I don't know what's going on. It says YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. As such, viewers will experience buffering, which is not fun. But I don't know what we're gonna do to dance around here in Discord or whatever, because nope. I don't know. So here we are, apparently. Yeah, top chat is open again. And I don't see anybody watching except me. Great. So, I'm going to have to change that a bit. Try that one. Yeah, that should work. Okay, let me go ahead and recopy this. Oh, Kim is here. Hi, Kim. Did you want to join us in the stream?
Oh, well, who's joining us?
Huh?
Who's joining us?
I think I'm asking if Chimera wants to join us. She is a person from Gamergate, so I mean I know her moderately well. We've spoken at some length in the past. No, I don't see her.
Perfect.
In the
another denizen of Gamergate. Welcome.
Yeah.
The more the merrier.
So I don't know. Let me go ahead and put this out here.
Of course.
So you will have to be in. Oh my goodness, what are they talking about in there? You will have to be in my YouTube Discord to join us, Kim, if you'd like to come in to the stream. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then. I'm going to mute myself so you can talk for a bit, Union Aerospace. And just let...
Okay, well, perhaps that could work. Well, in the meantime, I'm gonna check what's going on here. Oh, Tatsumi Kimishima stepping down as Nintendo president in June. For fuck's sakes. Well, might as well go along there, champ. You really provide a good service for Nintendo. No, in the meantime, let's check. Gary Young from The Guardian. Nearly every mass killer is a man. Why aren't we talking about that? So, bloody hell, The Guardian is still going strong with this, isn't it? Bloody hell with The Guardian sometimes. Oh, I've also apparently heard about how the whole thing of Count Dankula ended up. Fine of £800 from what I'm hearing. And to that I gotta say, so yeah?
Yeah, it was £800, which is about $1,100 in U.S. money. And he is appealing, fortunately, which is a good thing because, you know, it sets a precedent if it's allowed to stand. So hopefully he will be able to win his appeal, and then maybe the members of Parliament, members of the Scottish Parliament or whatever, will take notice that the law is flawed and take some steps to address those flaws.
I'm not even sure if they're even gonna address it, Giovanna, because apparently the governments of both England and Scotland have gone full 1984. And for example, have you seen the surveillance in London, for instance? From what I've heard, London is one of the cities with the most cameras in the world.
Yeah, I haven't been there since that started, but yes, from my understanding, everything is on camera there on CCTV. I would think probably more Brave New World than 1984, or perhaps a combination of Brave New World and 1984 and Fahrenheit 451. But I'm not sure we've gotten to Fahrenheit 451 levels yet.
No, they're not burning books down yet. So we didn't need to reach that. Even if there's some lunatic that is preaching for the burning of books because they're racist or because they offend them.
We haven't gotten to the point of burning books yet, but there certainly has been a lot of we're not going to teach this book anymore because it has a certain word in it that is bad, and you know that's kind of the whole point of the book. Like, for example, To Kill a Mockingbird, it contains the N-word, so they're not going to teach it anymore. And I'm like, but the book is about racial discrimination, right? It's trying to address those things, and oh, we don't care about context, which is basically the same thing that this guy said. I mean, he did say, in fact, to Marcus, Count Dankula, that context and intention don't matter, which is ridiculous, of course, because if anyone, I mean, as Marcus himself pointed out, when one of the reporters was trying to harass him after the trial, the guy said, you said blah, 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 you trained your dog to do such and such when you said the phrase gas the Jews. And Marcus said something about that, and the guy was like, well, you know, the context doesn't matter. And so Marcus pointed out to him that he had just said the phrase himself, and if context doesn't matter, that he had broken the law as well, you know, because even though it was a quote, right, it was still out of context the same phrase, right? So if context doesn't matter, you can't even talk about it. You can't quote him or anything, because doing so would be a violation of the law, unless you're willing to consider context.
Yeah, of course. Oh yes, I remember the fuckwit. I mean, it was the same fuckwit that tried to harass his girlfriend for that. Like, didn't you hear what they tried to do to his to Count Dankula's girlfriend? They went to her in order to ask quotations, ask her about if she considered funny the whole ordeal, and the cameraman tried to trip her. When I saw that, I was like, "That's a new low for you," which is not a surprise when the whole thing of journalism is now considered a fucking joke. In fact, recently in the whole career of journalism in my college, you know what they've done? They've eliminated the ethics, this ethics subject.
Oh, really?
Yep, they're not gonna teach ethics anymore because no one was going there.
Well, that's very disturbing and certainly not a good sign.
Nope. And not only that, you're gonna be, how you call it? You're gonna be laughing at this. Some weeks ago, the El Diario.es wrote an article about Gamergate. 3-4 years later, and they write just now about it.
Oh, I think I heard about that. And didn't this person get exposed as some kind of sex pest or something?
I'll how you call it? Spanish Gamergate. Let me try to tell you who it is. The Spanish article is the most insane shit I've ever read. If you need an archive, what? No. What's this? Is this archive? No. Do you want the? Oh yeah, I had forgotten that you don't read Spanish, so.
Well, I can probably read a little bit better than I can speak. I mean, I did grow up in Texas, so I do know a bit of Spanish. I've not had a lot of opportunity to use it in recent years. So, I mean, it's not like it used to be. I mean, when I was in Texas, I used to go into a Mexican restaurant and place my entire order in Spanish. But yeah, I don't really I don't really have the opportunity to use the language as much as I used to. But I could probably read some of it at least. Go ahead and drop the link into the news and info channel, and I'll have a look at it later.
Yep, I've sent the archive to so that you can read it later. But let's say that the author of the article is basically he has absolute contempt for men and calls fascists to anyone who disagrees with him. So El Diario.es is basically the Spanish Huffington Post. Probably because it's a newspaper linked to Podemos, if you've heard about them. Have you heard about that party in particular?
It's a political party, is it?
Podemos, yes. It's a political party founded by teachers of the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Lately, there's been some internal power struggle going on, and I lost my faith in them completely when they started to focus on the really wrong issues of what was going on.
So what are they focusing on at this point in time then?
At this point, I think they're mostly focusing on trying to say trying us to basically, how do you call it? They're focusing on fucking words and fucking words and pronouns, as in we need to be saying compañeros and compañeras, and we need to be saying paciente and pacienta, which basically it's patient, but we here say stuff in a different way in Spanish, right? Instead, the patient in our language is basically for the male pronunciation, it's el paciente. For the female one, it's la paciente. It's the same word for both cases, right? My point is basically that they're butchering the dictionary in order to appease a narrative.
So
you know what I mean?
What they're doing basically is trying to create a gender-neutral language out of an extremely gendered language?
Exactly.
Yeah, I see they tried to do this with Gaelic as well, which is the Celtic language of Scotland. And it comes out sounding very strange, like instead of saying fireman, they said what the word that they actually wound up using translates literally into fire being or fire entity or something like that. It's like they're talking about some kind of, elemental or something like that instead of a human being.
Also, do not talk to me about the fucking stupid ads I'm seeing right now in the cinema. I swear to God, every time I go into the cinema, we have to listen to an ad of an actor complaining about the gender pay gap. In every single cinema, well, not in every single cinema, but every time during these past 5 weeks, I've had to listen to that actor complaining about it in an ad. And you want to know what's the really fun thing of this actor? This actor was the main star of a show called Cuéntame Cómo Pasó, which is a Spanish series, right? And it was discovered that he had secret accounts in Panama.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, when he's complaining about that, I'm like, not sure. I think your virtue signaling is very disingenuous.
Yeah, there was some kind of, what was that? The Panama Papers that came out a couple of years ago about all these political figures and corporate executives who had vast amounts of money stored in offshore or, out of whatever their country was. And in some cases it was in Panama, if I understand correctly. But certainly there's the Cayman Islands, which is one of the most well-known offshore tax havens, if you will. People from the United States often have their savings in banks in the Cayman Islands because if you have a savings account, the federal government will tax it. They consider the interest on it to be income. So if you have a bank account outside the United States, then the interest isn't going to get taxed because it's not in the U.S. that you're making the money. And some of these places, such as the Cayman Islands, have this sort of privacy policy, so they don't let the U.S. federal government know who has money in these accounts and so forth. So there's no way the IRS can get to those accounts and charge to even know how much is in there and how much interest they're making, to know what kind of amount of tax to charge.
Yep, and the Panama Papers thing hit us really hard over here because, no surprise, most of the government was involved in it. And to be honest, this fucking country is going to hell. It's on a roller coaster going down and down and down, if you know what I mean.
Well, I do think that this is kind of happening in a lot of Western, so to speak, or first world nations. There's such an emphasis on the neoliberal economic policies that what it winds up doing is giving government subsidies to industries and giving tax incentives or tax breaks to various corporations, giving tax breaks to the wealthiest 1%, who are the people who can actually afford to pay some tax, and then it puts the burden of the tax on the middle class. Instead of the people who can actually afford to pay the taxes. They also work with trickle-down economics. They work with bubble economies, like, for example, the housing bubble we had towards in the 90s that kind of eventually burst, and that led to a lot of banking crises, I guess you would say, because the banks had engaged in risky lending to people that they knew were risky people to loan to. There is a lot of anti-labor union policies also enacted as part of the neoliberal scheme. It's basically, it's kind of like the exact opposite of socialism. So it's taking money from the poor to give to the wealthy. That's what it winds up being.
It's a reverse Robin Hood.
Yeah, exactly, and that's there's one of these laws, one of these tax cuts in the United States has been called a reverse Robin Hood law.
Oh shit! I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the people who proposed the law didn't call it that, but the people who were opposed to it certainly did and do.
I mean, there was no it kind of makes sense if you think about it. But the thing is, this country is a really special case. I think history books would learn a lot of us in the negative sense, if you know what I mean. Because we as a country, we're partidists, if you know what I mean. Or like they're my party, right or wrong, if I had to quote something.
Oh, partisans.
Yep.
Yeah. We have, unfortunately, that situation is rather prevalent in the United States as well. I mean, I've talked at times about how, and it used to be very obvious, the Republicans would come up with an idea which, if a Democrat had come up with it, all the Democrats would have supported it. But because a Republican came up with the idea, they have to oppose it just because that's the other party, right? And vice versa. The same thing would happen when the Democrats came up with an idea which the Republicans might ordinarily have supported, but just because the Democrats came up with it, they absolutely had to oppose it. At least superficially, they made a lot of noise. I don't think that there's a lot of opposition anymore. I think if you look at the way the two parties are running our government right now, they make noise as if they disagree with one another, and then when it comes time to vote, they vote the same way, pretty much.
Yep. The thing is, and we have a lot of issues, but the biggest issue so far is the thing of our Civil War also. Because you guys did an awesome job at managing the United States after your Civil War. Like, look at it, 150 years later, and there was no other attempt at building a second Confederacy. I'd say you guys did a very amazing job.
Well, there are occasional rumblings from certain states about seceding. I think, what is it, Vermont or New Hampshire is one that has in the past talked about the possibility of seceding, and they tend to be rather on the left side of things. Then you've got California, which is facing two different things right now. There's a group of people who want to split the state in two, and it's ridiculous the way they're doing it. I mean, I talked with Mundane Matt did a live stream not too long ago, and I was responding to him, or he was responding to me back and forth as I was out in the live chat. And what they need to do, if they're going to divide California up, they should divide it, in my opinion, into 3 or 2 different states, but they shouldn't do it the way that these people are trying to do it, which is they want to take basically all the coastal cities and make them one state, and the rest of the state, is going to be another state. And so they're trying to divide it down the center so that East and West are 2 different states, basically. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, it doesn't even make good ecological sense, and because there are at least two very different ecosystems in play there. You've got Northern California, which is more like Oregon, Washington, British Columbia. It's got that kind of temperate rainforest situation going on, and then you've got the very south part of California is more like Baja in Mexico. It's kind of desert-like. And then you've got this area in between, which is, it's not a temperate rainforest for sure, but it's also not quite desert. And then, I mean, I understand there is a difference between the West, that which is west of the Sierras, and that which is east of the Sierras, because on the west coast, you know, right there on the west side of the mountains, they do tend to get more rain, whereas east of the mountains, they tend to have a more desert-like climate. So, I mean, there is a case for that, but it just doesn't make sense, because the state is huge. It's a huge state. It's not as big as Texas, but going from north to south in California is quite a trek, indeed.
Yep, I kind of heard about it. I've heard about that thing, and one of them even tried to name it as the New California Republic, and I'm like, dude, that fucking name comes out of fucking Fallout. Be fucking original, at least.
And that is another thing. Not only are they talking about dividing the state in two, they're also talking about maybe the state should just secede entirely. And I'm like, okay, look, all you guys that, and I mean, most of the people who are talking about this are people who would point to the Supreme Court case in Texas versus White and say that case settled the question of the legality of secession. Never mind the fact that at the very beginning of the case, the justices said they weren't going to take up that consideration, and so they didn't. But supposedly, according to the pro-federalist types, that Supreme Court case did decide that secession is not legally permissible under the Constitution. Now, there have been rumblings from people talking about how Texas, because it used to be an independent republic, has the right to secede from the Union, and the same as far as California, which used to be its own republic as well. But in fact, neither of those states has any legal authority to secede from the Constitution, at least not, I mean, from the Union, at least not any more than any other state does. So, you know, if the so-called Confederacy in 1861 was not allowed legally under the Constitution to secede, then neither would Texas today, or California today, or New Hampshire, Vermont, whichever one of those two it is that talks about seceding occasionally. I forget. I know it's one of those two states, and I haven't heard much about that from that state recently, but like back in the late 90s and the first decade of this century, there were occasional rumblings about how they were thinking about seceding.
Well, that sounds a bit of a clusterfuck, if in my opinion. But for example, I was gonna tell you the thing of the Civil War for this reason. Whereas you guys had peace, we've had victory over here. You know what I mean? What I mean by that kind of difference?
You mean that the fascists, the nationalists, won and didn't really make peace with the anti-fascist movement or whatever. I don't really call them anti-fascist, but the Republican.
Exactly. Whereas you guys managed to make peace with the Confederates and integrate them back into the United States, the nationalists, they were okay with still hunting down whatever was left of the destroyed republic. You know what I mean? And that animosity has carried on to this day. The right of the political spectrum still clings on the victory of the Civil War, while the left still cries about the result of the Civil War.
Right.
It hasn't stopped. No one is willing to finally put a close to the debate of the Civil War, because it actually furthers their own interests. I know it's a bit of a weird thing.
Let me respond to Kim in the live chat here. She says, sorry, no, I have to disagree. California division is not based on geography, but in ideology. Long Beach, San Francisco, and the Bay Area just happen to be incredibly liberal. Meanwhile, people in the mountains tend to be more conservative and NRA supporters. People have been trying to make the state of Jefferson a thing for years, which is a portion of California that supports gun ownership and low taxes, as opposite to liberal California. And yes, Kim, there is that kind of ideological difference as well. But I would say that in the north, the people up in the northern area of California tend to be a lot more like people in Oregon and Washington, which means that they are more. I mean, there are more people in that area that are Green Party and Libertarian Party members. So you have a little bit of both. It's not so much. I don't think it's as much an ideology thing as it is a party thing. I think there's this strong independent streak in Northern California that you don't find so much in, say, the Valley or down in LA or somewhere like that. And that independent streak I see manifested in a lot more people being involved in third parties there than in the Valley or down in Los Angeles or whatever. So you'd have people there who are members of the Libertarian Party, and you also have people there who are members of the Green Party. And they don't really form a majority of the area, but there are more Green Party and Libertarian Party members up there than there are in the rest of the state, I think, probably all put together. So, I mean, there is that issue, but the big thing to me, I think, about dividing the state is that if it were going to be divided, it would need to be divided from, either right through the middle, with the north being one state and the south being another state, or it could be divided into 3 states, so you would have a southern and a middle and a northern state. And again, that northern state there, it would be different based on the independent kind of streak in terms of how they look at things. But it's also different in terms of the ecosystem, because it is a very different ecosystem from what you have, in the central part of California, the Valley area, which is, San Francisco and Santa Carla and San Jose and all that area, and Los Angeles, and further south, all that area down there is more, is kind of closer to desert. And if you go further south than Los Angeles, you certainly get into that kind of thing. So, I mean, Matt said that he thought it should just be divided in 2, but he agreed with me that it should be north and south instead of east and west. I'm inclined to say it should probably be divided into 3 states. So there should be a southern California, there should be sort of a central area there, and then the northern California. And I do think that there is some justification for dividing the state into 2 or 3 different states, because it is a huge state. Yeah, and you also have that issue where you have the 2 people who got the most votes of all in the original primaries are the people who wind up being the only 2 candidates or something like that for the general election. So, you have some less supported candidates, like from third parties and so forth. They're not going to make it into the top 2, and they're not going to be considered for the general election, if I understand that correctly. And I may be wrong, so if I am, please correct me.
Oh, damn. Let me check that one. So,
I mean, you also do have, there is a moderately strong Republican Party in California. I mean, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan were both governors of the state. Arnold Schwarzenegger, those guys were all Republicans. You had Sonny Bono as a senator or a representative from some area in California. So there is that there as well. And Sonny was certainly a Republican.
Oh, I didn't. Wow, I really need to recheck my how you call it. Really check my list of politicians.
Well, all of those guys, with the exception of Arnold, are deceased now. I mean, Nixon has been dead for several years. Reagan, not quite as long. Sonny Bono passed away sometime this century, I believe. I do remember when he died, and I remember, seeing Cher get on television and talk about him a bit, which was interesting. I mean, I grew up, when I was a kid, I used to watch the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour on television, and it was always, I really enjoyed that show. I've probably got a lot of it on video cassette now that I've taped off of, like, Nick at Night, or what was it? Not Nick at Night, TV Land, yeah. I think they're owned by the same parent company, but yeah, TV Land did rebroadcast a lot of the Sonny and Cher shows a few years back. I think it would have been in the late 90s. So I enjoyed getting to see all that again. That was pretty cool.
Oh, it does sound quite cool. But listen, it's just the whole thing with my country is so stupid and so insane that I try. It's always the same. I keep trying to avoid politics, but I keep getting dragged along into it. You know what I mean? It's that disgraceful sometimes.
Yeah, I understand the desire to not have anything to do. It is a shit show. I mean, it really is a shit show.
It is a shit show, and like, I only want to play games, dude. I only want to play games and to worry about my things like college, for instance. I don't fucking care what's going on in fucking Catalonia, for instance. We all know it's a shit show, anyways.
Yeah. I don't really know about the situation with Catalonia, but I do know that the police brutality basically is what won a lot of support for the people of Catalonia and their bid for independence. I think you have maybe a different perspective on that, if you'd like to talk about that for a moment.
I'll try to be brief because this topic is I'm biased. I told you I'm biased in this topic. I'm biased in this topic, but the problem is, first off, you need to consider what the nationalists are selling. If you know what I mean. To me, what they're selling is basically let's get away from Spain because we don't want to pay back the debt back to the central government. If you know what I mean. Because to be honest, the Catalonian politicians are one of the more corrupt kind in this country. They take, steal, and lie with an open face while they proclaim the good things of Catalonian nationalism to their people, and their people swallow it. For example, they've compared themselves to the Portuguese Revolution of 1974. They've also compared themselves with the Slovenian independence of from before Yugoslavia fell apart, right? And they also went as far as to proclaim that they were living under some sort of Spanish Third Reich, if you know what I mean. And to that, I only say, well, are we building up gas chambers for Catalonians now?
Yeah, it is. It is a bit of hyperbole, for sure. I mean,
it's hyperbole, and the police brutality thing, it was their own police doing that. Their own police participated in the repression. Granted, we also had parts of our own police too, but a good part of the repression was carried out by the Mossos de Esquadra. which is their own local police, right? Their own Catalonian police. They really thought that the police of Catalonia would side with them, and instead they sided with the central government. Ever since then, the Catalonians hate their own police.
I wasn't aware that it was their own police. I do know there were some people sent in to deal with the attempt to hold a referendum for independence.
Now, what I'm gonna tell you is this: the actuation was shoddy as shit. For example, the referendum. There was photos. The referendum. It wasn't viable. You know why it wasn't viable? Because there was a photo of a guy voting 4 times. 4 times in different places. And so when you see that, I'm like, not sure. I don't think this is legit. But at the same time, you don't crack down on them like they were some sort of terrorist movement. But it's the actuation of the government which was very overblown with this issue. Now,
I think that crackdown is what gained them so much international sympathy.
What really finds me is that I have to hear the opinions of an American centrist, I'm going to call that, telling us how we should run our country. Mostly because they flat out believe the moral values of the Catalonian nationalists. They believe them face. Hell, sometimes the Catalonian nationalists even say that the Catalonia existed before the Roman Empire showed up.
You're kind of. I'm not sure if it's just on my end or if people out there can detect it as well. But your voice is kind of. I mean, you're not coming through clearly.
My point in all this, that's basically overblown drama. It's overblown drama, and we've had this same moaning and crying for 40 years, I think, from both the central government and the nationalists. And what am I gonna tell you? Rich are getting richer, poor are getting poorer. It's the same bloody story in Spain. And the corrupt politicians are getting more corrupt. It's nothing new, really. It's